This is the How Design Live podcast, hosted by programming partner Ilise Benun, national speaker, author of 7 business books for creative professionals, and founder of marketing-mentor.com. Listen to her lively conversations with past and future How Design Live speakers about the business of creativity and creativity in business. Here's Ilise Benun.
Can an introvert be a good presenter or an excellent communicator? Eleanor Handley says yes. In fact, in our podcast interview, which is a little teaser for her upcoming session at How Design Live, which is called Speak to be Heard, Communicating Your Best Ideas, she said that even if you are the world's shyest person, or even if you hate to present, or both, you can use the tools she will be teaching to make an impact and to do it confidently. In fact, she says you don't need to feel confident to project confidence, and that it's not about faking it. Listen and learn. Hello, Eleanor. Welcome to the How Live podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Eleanor Handley. The first thing you'll be able to tell immediately from my voice is that I grew up in Australia. I've lived in New York for the past 11 years now. I have a background twofold, really, 2 parallel careers, one in the traditional performing arts. So I have a MFA and have spent the last 8 years or so performing professionally on the American stage and screen. And then the other side of my life is this corporate consulting communications training work, which I've been doing also for the better part of 10 years and which I love.
And I understand that your specialty is in dialects and accent modification. And so, based on the first thing that you said, which is that people can tell that you're from Australia, I think when I first met you, I thought you were British, of course.
Right.
So what is the difference between an Australian accent and a British accent?
Well, to be fair, I think the fact that I have been in the States for a little while, my perhaps most broad Australian accent has softened a little bit or has rounded out a little bit. The Australian accent, as you might recognise it, and I'm sort of turning it on a little bit for you now, is quite lateral, it's quite nasal, it's quite flat musically, and it happens a lot in the back of the mouth and sort of through the nasal and cheek mask. Whereas if I come forward for the more British sound, and again, I'm not just sort of giving a brief example, I'm not pretending to be quite perfect in my British accent, but that's going to happen a lot more forward. The lips get a lot more involved in that, and the articulators are a lot more turned on. So that would be the big difference there.
Interesting. Thank you. So I was just free associating, and that question came to my mind. But I do want to talk with you about, your presentation at How Design Live this year in Chicago. That's May 2nd through 6th. And I'm very excited that you're coming to speak on a topic that I think is applicable to absolutely everyone and that absolutely everyone needs more and more these days. It's called Speak to be Heard, Communicating Your Best Ideas. Because, when I talk to clients about their problems, it always boils down to a communication problem. So I want you to talk a little bit about the range of communication as you help people do it, whether it's clarifying what you actually mean and or saying it clearly, articulating it clearly.
Sure. Yes, of course. Well, I love to hear you say that it's applicable to everybody, because I think that's one of the things we find in this work is we just run the gamut of industries and, from highly corporate legal and finance to academia to startups, which is obviously where we met. But the truth is we all, in some capacity professionally, have to present our ideas and want to get them across in the most impactful and memorable way. And I think that one of the problems people run into when they're particularly in professional or sort of more high-stakes settings is that our idea of what good communication is narrows. There's kind of this idea of, well, I have to be sort of serious and clear and articulate, and it sort of stifles our more, I guess I hate the word natural, but our more authentic selves. So one of the first things that we talk about when we're working with clients is the idea of reframing what we think of when we think of presentations. And in fact, whether it's to a room full of 50 people or for most of us, the most impactful communication settings in our professional lives will be in a group of maybe 2 or 3, maybe it's just you and your boss, maybe it's a conference room with 10 people, but regardless of how many people it is, we really want to start thinking about presentations as conversations, because the most impactful communicators realize that great communication comes from being focused on the other person. And if your main focus is actually delivering a message rather than how do I sound? Do I sound smart? Am I saying that right? Am I pausing too long? Am I saying too many words? Am I speaking too quickly? That turns the focus inward and ultimately diminishes your impact as a communicator.
That's very interesting. And you're making me think of the event I hosted actually and moderated last night here in Savannah at SCAD, which was our How Design Live at SCAD presentation with Mona Patel, who presented last year actually at How Design Live. And she calls herself an introvert, and many creative professionals think they are or perhaps are introverts. And she said that she needs to take time to focus and quiet herself down before she presents to a group, no matter the size. And so I'm curious what your take is on introverts, especially, and how they can communicate and present more clearly.
That's an interesting question. I love that because, well, let me answer it this way. The name of the company that I work for is GK, Training and Communications, and the G and the K in that stand for genuine know-how, right? And that's our philosophy. Our aim is to give people repeatable, actionable tools that they can use to come across as their most genuine selves, with emphasis on this word genuine, or back to this idea of authenticity. And this idea that there is not one way of communicating. There's not one great presenter or one great style. I think audiences and listeners respond to the idea or the sense that they're getting a really authentic version of you. There's something incredibly captivating about a quiet style, a quiet measured mode that kind of makes you come to them, right? As the listener, you go to the speaker. But in terms of the skill set and in terms of these actionable, repeatable tools that I'm mentioning, the idea is that no matter how you feel, whether you hate getting up in front of people, whether you're tired because you didn't get enough sleep last night, whether you don't feel like you had enough time to prepare, you have these tangible, repeatable, physical things you can do to convey whatever sense you want to get across. So you might be the world's shyest person, you might hate presenting, but there are physical changes you can make to convey confidence, exuberance, energy, if you so choose. And I think that's the toolkit, that's the empowerment we're looking to give people. This idea that you don't actually need to feel confident to project confidence.
But you're not talking about faking it either, right?
No, I'm not. Well, there is a little, that's a good question. Am I talking about faking it? I guess I'm advocating something that might fit into that fake it till you make it thing. Although what you find is that you change your body, you change yourself, right? This idea that actually they feed into each other. It's one of those infinity loops. It's what we call the virtuous cycle of good communication. So if I'm getting enough breath to project my voice loudly enough to reach the edges of the room, one of the things I can't do while I'm breathing is speak. So I'm giving myself an extra nanosecond to think of something smarter to say. Suddenly I hear myself saying something smarter and I'm connected to the audience, so I see them maybe nodding or smiling, and that feedback loop gives me the confidence, the energy to maybe go off in a different direction and reinforce something that I just thought of in, again, that extra nanosecond that I'm taking while I'm giving myself enough breath, et cetera, et cetera.
So the suggestion there from a physical point of view is take a deeper breath, or give yourself time, or remember to breathe even.
Remember, I love that you actually that's one of our acronyms that we hand out a lot, RTB. In fact, if you were to ask me the one piece of advice I would give your listeners today, if you do nothing else, take a breath before you start speaking. It sounds like the most simple thing in the world. We probably, as they're listening, people probably think, well, of course I do that. I have to breathe to live. But you'd be amazed how many people, in the rush to sort of speak, in the rush to show that you're on top of things and that you know what you want to say, just kind of launch in. So yeah, that would be my one key piece of advice for today. Remember to breathe.
I like that. And also, I'm thinking about preparation, because breathing, the type of breathing you're talking about, could be part of preparation. And I personally find that the more preparation I do, the calmer I am before any presentation. What do you think about that?
I think preparation and practice is essential and probably the most underutilized. Or let me start that over. Preparation is key, but I think we need to shift our thinking about how we prepare. We walk into a lot of rooms with clients who are about to give a presentation, and we'll say, have you practiced? And they'll put their piece of paper on the table with their notes on it and say, yep, that's I sat down and I typed that out. But the number of people who've actually stood up and out loud tried to practice is slim to none. So I think what you're talking about, or what we're touching on here, is this idea that you start to build these physical habits in from the preparation stage. So it's not an intellectual exercise. Communication is a physical art form, right? So you can't think your way out of a physical problem. So you need to start building these muscles of standing, talking, taking a breath, producing enough sound right from the practice stage.
Now, let me step back for a second, because you and I met in Hoboken last year when I was attending the New Jersey Tech Meetup, which is a monthly event I like to go to. And at that event, there are always 3 entrepreneurs who pitch in front of the audience before the actual presentation. And you have been brought in to critique the people who pitch. And I think it's usually a surprise to them. It seems like a surprise to them that they're going to be critiqued on their 5-minute presentation. And one of the things that you've said to many people, and that I love, and I'm going to connect it to something you just did, is this idea, I think you called it transparency, when if you make a mistake, don't stress about it, just recover from it by acknowledging it. And you just said, you started to answer my question, and then you said, let me start over. And I thought maybe we should edit that out. And then I thought, no, because that's exactly the type of thing she advocates. So let me have you talk about that.
I feel like you're doing my job for me. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for highlighting that. And yes, transparency, right? This idea that we're all human beings, and you'd be amazed the latitude an audience will give you. And by audience, again, I'm using that term to mean the other person in the room or the other 50 people in the room, will give you if you include them on the experience you're having. So rather than letting a mistake, be it a technical glitch with your slides, or you forgot a big chunk of your material that you wanted to say, or you're just finding yourself short of breath, you'd be amazed if you just say something like, wait, I forgot to say the most important thing, let me go back. Or, I'm sorry, I misspoke, let me start over. Or even, I'm feeling a bit nervous today. I'm not used to being up in front of a room of this many people. Taking them with you, leading them through the experience you're having, including your audience, they'll give you a tremendous amount of latitude there. And actually, it does a number of things that might seem counterintuitive. It makes you seem spontaneous, which people love. They love to feel that this is happening in the moment. It's not just some regurgitated speech that you're pressing play on. And it actually makes you seem more trustworthy because you're able to acknowledge what's actually happening. And finally, back to this idea of great communication being focused on the other person, it shows your listeners that you're much more interested that they're getting the information than in the idea that you're doing this great performance, that you're doing it perfectly. So yes, I'm a big advocate for transparency, and I think it's probably one of the most underutilized tools because we get up there and we feel this pressure to be perfect. And I would definitely like to say, aim for flexibility, not flawlessness.
I love alliteration, Eleanor. And actually, I would add to your list and link it back to GK, because it seems to me that acknowledging your mistake or correcting yourself or recovering in the moment is more genuine and spontaneous, as you said, but also more genuine than something that is flawless. And so at the same time, though, we're not saying make a mistake, right?
Oh, no. Let me clarify that in big red letters. There is no need to stop yourself and flag every single glitch, right? Let me share them. We have these 3 Fs of transparency. The first one is fake it. If no one knows it's happened and internally it's not going to submarine you, right? It's not going to throw you off so completely, move on, let it go. The second one is feature it, right? If you're particularly quick on your feet, if you can turn it into a bonus. Oh, I'm glad I forgot to say that because it gives me time to mention A, B, and C or whatever, then great. Or if you can turn it into a joke, even better. If you can get an audience laughing, that's always gravy. But finally, and this is probably the most useful one, just fix it. Fix it out loud. Let the audience know what you're doing. I'm just going to take a minute to get these slides working. There we go. And move on.
I love that. I was just trying to think, what was the most recent mistake I have made when presenting? And, did I fix it? Did I feature it? What was the first one?
The first one is fake it.
If
no one knows, just keep going.
Right. I probably faked it. And actually, this will link to my last question for you. Because last night when I introduced Mona Patel, our speaker, I wanted to make sure that I got all of what I wanted to say out. And so I read something aloud. And I didn't have just talking points. I wanted to make sure I said everything. And I don't usually do that, but I did. And so my question is there a way to read something aloud that is more effective or more engaging than the boring way most people read things aloud?
I love this question. Tell me what you mean by boring way. Because I think I have a sense, but I want to make sure I know.
Yeah, I think that I could imagine myself, or I was trying to hear myself read it as just as I'm reading it, as opposed to looking up at the audience and stopping for a moment of effect or emphasizing one thing with my voice going up. I don't know the right word to say that, but just using my voice to make it more in the moment because it's not spontaneous. It's being read. It's already been written. And I'm sorry. I just have this association, so I'll say it, which is, the difference when Trump is extemporaneously just saying whatever comes to his mind versus when he's reading off the teleprompter. I just find that distinction, like there's such a huge difference between it. So those are my examples.
That's fantastic. And I love that this is the last question because it actually ties in so many of the things that we've been talking about. The first one, let's start with the last thing we're talking about, back to this transparency idea. The power of just saying, I'm going to read this verbatim because I don't want to forget anything. Already, you've invited the audience into what's going on rather than just getting up and starting to read from the page. So again, back to this latitude and leeway idea, they're going to feel like they're part of the experience. The second thing you mentioned is about keeping in contact with the audience even when you are reading. The thing that is going to make any presentation feel more spontaneous is being in this constant feedback loop with the audience. So that even if you're reading, if you can know it well enough, or even during the periods and pauses, find time to look up and connect with the audience, perhaps even imperceptibly to you, they're going to be giving you things. They're either going to be nodding or looking a bit confused, or they're going to be giving you these nonverbal signals that allow you to modulate where you need to go, right? Maybe they'll laugh, which gives you time to decide, okay, let me take a little longer before I move on. Maybe they'll look confused, so you'll just want to say something again. Even when you're reading, you want to keep in this contact loop so that A, they know that you're most interested in them, but B, you will, as a flexible presenter, incorporate the feedback you're getting into where you go next, even with written or prepared material. So they would be my two big pieces of advice for read material. And then you touched on this idea of intonation or vocal variety. Variety is great. It's best when it's not arbitrary, right? If I say to you, oh, vocal variety is great, and you get up and start reading something and arbitrarily start going high and low and, oh, it's really good because the communications person told me that I should vary my voice. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but you want to allow variety to be about conveying meaning. And again, if you stay in contact with your audience, they're going to tell you what they need to make it as clear as possible.
So the thing about last night that was really interesting, I love your suggestions about, looking at the audience and seeing how they're giving me feedback. I couldn't see a thing. The lights were so bright on me and the audience was dark. And so I was just looking out into the black thinking, all right, well, I'm looking at you, but I don't see anything.
Right. Well, yes. Okay. So technical impediments are a whole other podcast. But in that situation, this is my advice for you. Make it interesting for you, right? Let it be new for you for the first time. In the reading of it, and this is what getting back to how to practice. I'm a big fan of practice, but repetitive practice where it starts to take on that rehearsed quality is not going to be your friend when you're presenting. So you want to discover it for the first time, and this might sound a bit weird, but tell yourself the story as if for the first time. Make it engaging and interesting to you and sort of play both roles for yourself, the person wanting to convey the message, but also the person hearing yourself for the first time. And again, this would be something we could talk about ad nauseum, but I would say the more free you can feel to take your time, be expressive, let the thoughts hit you and affect you, the more chance you have in that, looking out into that bright void of reaching the audience.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Eleanor. Please tell people where they can find you online.
Oh, sure. Our website is gktrainingandcommunications.com. We're on Twitter at Genuine Know-How. And we're on Facebook as Genuine Know-How as well.
Excellent. And we will see you in Chicago. I can't wait for you to share. I mean, there's just so much, as you said, we could talk about when it comes to communicating clearly, and it is so important. So I can't wait.
Lovely. Looking forward to it.
Me too. See you soon.
Thanks, Ilise.
At some point, we all need to present our ideas, whether to a boss, a client, a team, or a big auditorium of strangers. And we need to do it with impact and clarity, with confidence, and especially with authenticity. So I love Eleanor's strategies, especially the ones about transparency. I will be taking her advice for my own presentations at How Design Live, especially the Get Better Clients Bootcamp. I hope to see you there. That will be May 2nd through 6th, 2017 in Chicago. And be sure to take advantage of the early bird deadline at howdesignlive.com. You can also find more of my podcasts at marketingmentorpodcast.com and howdesign.com. So thanks for listening, and I'll be back again soon with more conversations about the business of creativity and creativity in business.
You've been listening to the How Design Live podcast with Ilise Benun, the programming partner for How Design Live. You can subscribe to this podcast in the iTunes Store or on SoundCloud. We hope you found it both inspiring and practical, like everything How Live. And we hope to see you at the next How Design Live, May 2nd through 6th, 2017 in Chicago. Get all the details at www.howdesignlive.com.